brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
If I know nothing about my players, what do I want to do offensively and defensively? I always start with that, which for me is a modified dribble drive, tack, transition basketball. Defensively, it is pressing, pressure, multiple defenses. Then you look at your personnel and say, can we do these things?
Kevin Braaten is the boys basketball head coach at Berea-Midpark High School in Cleveland, Ohio. He took over the boys program this season after 2 different stints as the head girls coach at the school. As a head coach for both boys and girls, Braaten has won more than 225 games in his career. Kevin played his high school basketball at Strongsville and collegiately at Baldwin Wallace University, where he was selected to the Ohio Athletic Conference first team 3 times and twice to the NCAA Division III All-American team. As a center, he led his teams to 2 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances in 1995 and 96. His 1,867 career points ranked 4th in school history, and his 1,230 rebounds ranked 1st. Hey Hoopheads, this December our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball are offering $1,000 off and 2 free basketballs with a Dr. Dish home purchase. Plus, all their commercial models are $2,500 off this month. Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. You can also check out their holiday gift guide if you're shopping for the ball player in your life.
Hi, this is Justin Brantley from Helium Sports and Entertainment Marketing, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
The first training camp Elite Skill Development and Performance Combine will be held on the campus of Western Reserve Academy, just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, powered by Unleash Potential and the Hoopheads podcast. The camp is designed for boys rising to grades 6 through 9 and will take place June 29th through July 1st, 2023. An emphasis on improving individual skills in the context of a team environment will be the hallmark of the training camp. Mike Klinzing from Head Start Basketball and the Hoopheads podcast and Joe's Decision from Unleashed Potential will serve as the camp directors of this inaugural training camp. Campers can expect 3 days of hard work, intense skill instruction, and learning how to be a great teammate on and off the court at the training camp. Players will participate in 10 elite skill development sessions led by some of the best coaches from across the country. Visit headstartbasketball.com to get registered. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Get ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Kevin Braaten, head boys basketball coach at Berea-Midpark High School in Cleveland, Ohio. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sonkel tonight, and we are pleased to welcome to the pod Kevin Braaten, the head boys basketball coach at Berea High School here in the state of Ohio. Kevin, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Excited to have you on. Looking forward to diving into all the things that you've been able to do throughout your basketball life. Want to start by going back in time to when you were a kid, growing up in Strongsville, and tell us a little bit about some of your first experiences with the game of basketball.
Sure. I mean, it really starts with my dad, putting a hoop up in our yard and just really spending a lot of time with my dad, playing one-on-one and free throw contests and all the things that kids my age did with their dad. He was the one that got me excited about the game. And, I wouldn't be where I am without him. I know that for sure. And then, as you know, Mike, growing up in Strongsville, you didn't really play organized basketball till 8th grade. So, and I went through the whole Strongsville rec with Mr. Fry as a 3rd and 4th grader. And those were fun times, Saturday morning basketball. And, when you saw Mike Cleansing walk in the gym as one of your coaches, that was a big deal to kids my age. So that was always great. And playing at Albion Junior High for Coach Napick. And I never actually got to play for Coach Eicher, but, I always looked up to him as a coach. And then as a 9th grader, in Strongsville, 9th graders were actually at the junior high. And the varsity coach, Coach Casey, and the varsity assistant, Coach Connors, said to me and my parents, hey, we think maybe he could play JV as a freshman, which meant getting on a bus by myself and, driving with the bus driver over to Strongsville High School. I just remember the first practice, I was scared and walked in the gym and nobody really talked to me. And Coach Connor said, well, we'll get in the drill. And I was a freshman and, definitely very nervous and went into like a 4-on-4 shell drill. And the senior post player, Matt Persiak, basically just beat the living crap out of me. And there's blood everywhere. And I'm kind of looking around like, is anybody going to say anything? But I just kept going and he was beating me up. And finally, Coach Connors is like, go clean yourself up. And he kind of looked at me like, it was almost like a little test, were you tough enough to come over here and play and practice against the varsity team. So, that's kind of how my career started. And I loved Coach Thompson and Coach Connors and Coach Casey. They were like second fathers to me. My time at Strongsville it was just great, and I know you kind of know what I'm talking about with that. But when you get your varsity uniform in Strongsville, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So
I think there's two things there that you hit on that stick out for me. And I think the one is, obviously, you talk about going through the Strongsville recreation program. And I've touched on this a number of times on the podcast, and just how influential that program was on me, both, as you said, when you're a player and you get a chance to look up to the guys who came down that were high school players when you were in elementary school, and those guys would come down and coach you, and then you go and see them play on Friday night and come running out in the warm-up line. Like, I always feel like that was something that had a huge impact on me, looking at those guys and saying, wow, someday I want to be out there and, be able to come out with the band playing and go through the layup line and all those kinds of things. And just, you think about the impact that those coaches that you got a chance to work with, again, they weren't coaches at the time. They were kids that were playing high school basketball, but you really looked up to those kids. And I think that was something that really had a huge impact on me, both when I was a player and then also obviously when you're a coach and you get a chance to coach the littler kids. I think it's something that obviously basketball has kind of gone away from that in terms of the way we run our youth programs today, but it's something that I think kids missed out on. Somebody who didn't get to go through that, I don't think understands how special that is. So it's cool to hear you mention that. And then I think the second piece that, when I hear you talking about it and remembering back to the time when, Strongsville, we had a junior high system where we were 7th, 8th, and 9th grade were at separate schools. And so you didn't get to the high school until you were in 10th grade. And I think it's different today, and maybe I get your perspective on this, but how was it for you just going up and playing above your grade level? Because I feel like nowadays that's maybe not as big of a deal in terms of sort of the interpersonal relationships, and there's more of a blurring of the lines between grades. But I feel like back in the time when I was playing, when you were playing, that there was more of a definitive line between, okay, you're a 10th grader, you're an 11th grader, you're a 12th grader. How did that go for you? Not so much from a basketball standpoint, from a kind of fitting in standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was difficult because, at least for me, I was going to school with my classmates at Albion Junior High, but I was playing basketball with the kids at the high school. So I didn't really have that type of connection with my teammates that you would have now, Because like you said, things are definitely more mixed now. So I think socially it was probably pretty tough for me. But from a basketball standpoint, I obviously loved it. So, but you're right. I think at Strongsville at that time, not many guys even played 3 years of varsity basketball. I mean, it was very rare. I think, like Tucker Neal, people don't really believe this, but he really didn't play varsity basketball until he was a junior, as great of a player as he was. So, it's things have definitely changed.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. When you think back to your time as a high school player, do you have a favorite memory or two that stands out?
I think my sophomore year, we went 20-0, and it was we had clinched the conference title. We obviously went undefeated in the Pioneer Conference, and the seniors, Tucker and Joe Mackey, and a couple of the other ones said, we don't want to cut the nets down until we go 20-0. And our 20th game opponent was St. Ignatius, who, obviously at that time and still was a powerhouse. And so that game with Ignatius, we were 19-0. The game was sold out at the beginning of the JV game, and we obviously won the game. And so that memory is probably the one that I remember the most.
As you look back and you think about, you mentioned earlier about working with your dad when you were a little kid, but when you got into high school and you started working on your game, what was the process that you went through for getting better? Today, obviously, kids can go on and work with a trainer, or they can go on YouTube and find a million different drills to do and ways to improve. But back in the time when you and I were playing, it was a little bit different. You didn't have access to that stuff. But when you think about how you went about getting better and working on your game, how did you balance working on your game by yourself versus playing pickup versus just what were some of the things that you did to improve yourself as a player back when you were in high school?
Sure. Honestly, I didn't play a ton of pickup basketball, especially when I was younger. It was mainly, truthfully, it was watching basketball on TV, watching somebody like Kevin McHale and, studying his footwork I was a post player. So I was studying his footwork. I'd go, my dad took me to every Strongsville game. And the post player when I was younger was Steve King. So I would watch him and how did he score in the post? And then I would just go in the backyard and try to recreate those types of moves. And it was really a lot of backyard. I was, in the back working on my footwork, shooting a ton of free throws, and just doing it kind of on your own. And then obviously as I got to high school, there was a little bit more pickup. At the Omni, I mentioned Joe Mackey and his dad owned it, and ton of high school players went there. So that's kind of where I played pickup. But as far as working on my game, it was really, me by myself, with a ball and a basket, and that's really it. And like you said, today the landscape's totally changed.
Yeah, it's completely different. I think about the amount of time that I spent either working on my game by myself or playing pickup wherever it might have been, whether it was outdoors or whether I spent a lot of time at the Omni as well. And just you think about doing it that way versus today, kids playing AAU basketball or working with a trainer, and just the amount of time. I know we'll get into this as we talk about you as a high school coach, but you think about the amount of time that you put in as a high school coach to have the gym open and to do workouts and to get guys in the gym. And that just wasn't the same. The expectation of high school coaches back in the day wasn't the same, and they just didn't have access. Like, I don't remember having access to a gym the way kids have access to gyms today. It was like, yeah, you got to go and you got to go outside, and like you said, in your backyard, on your driveway, wherever, at the courts that you could find in the neighborhood. And so it was just a completely different experience of what kids go through today. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. Talk a little bit about after you get done with high school, you get an opportunity to be recruited, and talk a little bit about that. And then obviously you end up going to BW after leaving Western Michigan, but just talk a little bit about your experience being recruited and what you remember about that time.
Sure. Again, things were so different. There's no cell phones, there's no internet. So I mentioned my dad. He was always my biggest supporter, my sister and I, and every letter that I got, he kept. And we have, I don't remember how many, 3 or 4 binders of letters, because that's how colleges would contact you. And I kind of got a little taste of, how recruiting can be, because I literally got a letter from the University of Cincinnati every single day. And, hey, we want you to come down for a visit. And then one day they hired a coach. I think most people know by name of Bobby Huggins. And I never heard from him again. So like anything, the recruiting process is difficult. Western Michigan, the assistant coach was a guy by the name of Parker Lakota. We really hit it off on the phone, and I really liked him. And the only issue was the head coach never came and saw me play. And Coach Lakota did, and said you're a good fit for what we want to do. And then about 3 weeks before I was going to go up there, he got an assistant coaching job at Notre Dame. So kind of the guy that was my supporter was gone, and I just kind of got a feeling that I that wasn't a good fit for me. I kind of knew it right away and kind of communicated that to my parents. Thankfully, again, I have very supportive parents, and on winter break, I was home and up at the Omni, and I was talking to Joe Mackey, and he said, how do you like it up there? I said, it's okay. I said, I'm not super happy. And he was like, you should transfer and come home to BW. And Joe is truly the best teammate I ever played with. So, the thought of maybe playing with him again was intriguing, and mentioned it to my parents. And over spring break, I visited with Coach Bankson and at BW, and I just loved the man, and everything worked out and ended up transferring there. So, it was, I would say that, we always talk about this with our players. You're going to fail in sports. And unfortunately for me, I didn't really fail in basketball until I was 19 years old. But it was a great life lesson about you got knocked down a little bit, but you got to pick yourself up and keep going.
How important when you have conversations now with kids in whether it's in your role as a head coach or whether you've been involved with AAU and you're just talking to kids and conversations about finding the right fit for you? Because obviously we all know that there's a huge stigma, a huge pressure on everybody wants to go and play Division I basketball, and it's a huge thing that's out there that everybody talks about, and you see it on social media. And yet at the same time, you see so many kids that end up having a suboptimal experience because they're not in the right place. And I think so often it's just a challenge to get kids, families to understand sort of what the college experience should be all about, both from an academic and from an athletic standpoint. So just how do you use your own experiences when you're having conversations with kids who are trying to make a decision about, hey, what's going to be the best fit for me when I go to school?
Sure. I always start with that you're the only one who's going to know what your college experience was like,
Yep.
And whether that's D1, D2, D3, NAIA, or, hey, I'm just going to go be a student. You're the one who's going to experience those 4 years. And we like to tell, and it's true, they're 4 of the best years of your life. So you got to enjoy it and make sure you're somewhere where, you're going to have great memories of those 4 years. And I think that's how I always kind of start the conversation. My own daughter's a senior, and, we kind of had those discussions, and, she made the decision that she wanted to, play Division III basketball, which, I'm really excited for. But I had that same conversation with her that I've had with dozens of players about, let's figure out what the best fit for you is.
What did that look like for her?
Well, it was a rough summer. She tore ACL in June. We didn't really know it was horns, and, we got some conflicting, trainer said, we think maybe she displaced her kneecap. And we said, like, can she hurt it any worse? And they were like, not really. So, July is the big month for AAU. So we went down and played, and she made a cut on her knee, and her knee collapsed. And, I kind of looked at my wife, and we kind of knew her ACL was torn. And so she missed a big chunk of July, and some of those opportunities that she would have had to play Division I kind of disappeared. There were some opportunities to maybe do a preferred walk-on at a Division I school. versus looking at some D3 schools that were really interested in her. And she was really interested in the college more than just the basketball program. So I hate to say things happen for a reason, but I think for her, it kind of worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
All right, let's talk before we dive back into your career. Let's take a sidetrack here and talk a little bit about basketball parenting. And you've obviously been in the basketball world as a player yourself, as a coach who's had to coach players, deal with and work with parents that have been parts of your programs. And then you've been a parent yourself. So if you were going to give somebody whose kid is just entering into sort of the age where they begin getting involved with travel basketball, what are some things that you would share with parents to make sure that their kids had the type of experience that we would all hope for our kids? What are some things you share with people?
I think the first thing is to always remember, and this can be difficult for all parents, not just parents who played sports, but that this is their journey, not your journey, and enjoy it. Like, enjoy the process. I look back, and my wife and I talk about all the time, we wish we would have just enjoyed watching our kids played instead of worrying about, she needs to play better, or, if a college coach comes, are you playing up to your capabilities? And, worrying about all the little things instead of just enjoying the process and understanding that, again, it's their thing. It's not our thing. We can't want it for them, but just enjoy it because it goes so fast.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I'm seeing that. I sent my first daughter to college this year, and she's not a basketball player, but you just realize how fast that goes. And I think that as a parent, and obviously for you or for myself, that, we spend a lot of time coaching our own kids. So, then you have then you're trying to serve two masters there as their coach and help them to improve and get better. And yet at the same time, you're trying to, as you said, enjoy the process of watching them go through it. And I think that one of the things that I always found, and I don't know if you found this to be the case for you, but I've often said that when I'm coaching them, it's so much more difficult from a standpoint of the wins and losses. As a coach, those things stick with you, and it could be a third grade boys or girls basketball game, and you can keep yourself up all night thinking about this or that or whatever. And then conversely, when I'm a parent, I'm rooting for them when I'm in the stands and I want things to go well, but I can put the results aside a lot easier as a parent than I can as a coach. So it's kind of interesting for me, at least, to float back and forth between those two roles and try to keep in mind and keep it in perspective, as you said, because it's really easy to get caught up in this or that or how well they're playing or what the situation is, or as you said, is somebody coming to see them play. And you just have to, again, I think it's great advice to just enjoy it and try as much as you can to realize that the journey's theirs and not yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when you are kind of filtering in as a coach and as a parent, it's even more difficult sometimes those lines become blurred. But, I think you also have to keep in mind that when you do coach your child, that you are creating experiences that you're going to have with your son or daughter for the rest of your lives. And it's always something that connects you together. And so if you do have that I always say, if you ever have the opportunity to coach your kids, do it, even if it is just 1 year, because it's something they'll never forget.
Yeah, the experience part of it is really, really important. I think that if you keep it in perspective, whether you're talking about it from a parent perspective or from a coaching perspective, what you ultimately want to do is you want those memories and those experiences to be good ones. I always said that there were times where when my kids, especially when they were littler, that I wanted to drag them to the gym when I was going to the gym to do things. And there were times that they didn't want to go. I mean, there were times they did, but there were times that they didn't. And part of me always was like, God, because I was wired in one way and, my kids, everybody, obviously they're all wired differently. And I'm like, well, why don't they want to go? I don't understand that. Again, that's not how I was wired. And so part of you says, well, I know I shouldn't drag them with me, but part of me says that I should. And it's a difficult line to walk, I think, sometimes as a parent. But ultimately, what I kept trying to remind myself, and even as someone who kind of knows the pitfalls, at least theoretically, you still find yourself kind of falling into things that you're like, no, I'm not sure I should be not sure I should be doing that, but I always tried to err on the side of, I looked at it out of the lens of, I want my relationship with my kids to be fantastic when they're 25 and not have them look back and be like, dad was a pain in the neck because he always made me go do things that I didn't want to do. And that's not to say that you can't push your kids a little bit and prod them. But at the same time, I think that you can definitely get into situations. I know you've seen it and I've seen it, that you just have a parent who goes completely overboard, and either A, the kid hates basketball, or B, hates the parent because the parent just does some things that make that relationship fractured. And that's kind of the lens that I always tried to look at it through, was I want the relationship to be the most important part of it. And the basketball side of it, yeah, it's important, but it's not nearly as important as having a good relationship with your kid, both in the moment and also going on into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've seen a lot of those that you're talking about. And I mean, I'm going to be really honest with you. As somebody who's coached their kids, I've probably made every mistake in the book. I always say I'm going to keep learning and trying to get better in terms of interacting with my own child and my own children while I coach them versus the other kids. And it's truly difficult because you love your kids so much and you just want to see them be as successful as they can be.
Which isn't easy. It is not easy to sit either on the sideline as a coach, or I could tell you sitting in the stands watching them play, as I know you can, that's challenging for everybody. And like I said, as you mentioned, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I feel like I know some of those pitfalls, and yet I still find myself either making those mistakes or really having to have an internal fight with myself to not make those mistakes. So it's a challenge. When you think back to your time at BW, when did coaching get on your radar? Was that something that you always thought in the back of your mind that you wanted to do? Was it something that you came to that more towards the end of your playing career, or was it something? When did coaching get on your radar?
I mean, I think for me, once I realized that the playing career was going to end sooner rather than later, I knew I wanted to be involved in basketball. So really, for someone like me, it was really an easy choice. I'm going to go into education, become a teacher so I can coach basketball. I had so many great role models as coaches, from my high school coaches to my college coach, that it was kind of like, I want players to feel like how I felt about my coaches and to have that opportunity, and if I could be that type of coach for someone, just like my coaches were for me, that would be a really fulfilling career.
What were some of the things that you took or you learned from some of the coaches, whether it was Coach Casey, Coach Connors, Coach Thompson at Strongsville, or whether it was Coach Bankson at BW? Are there things that you can think back that they did or how they influenced you that still are part of your coaching today?
I think, starting with Coach Thompson, he was just a man of high character who came to practice every day, and he was always prepared. Whether it was a drill or, team stuff, I always felt like, man, Coach Thompson really knows the game. To come to practice every day and to be prepared and for your players to feel that way, that's probably what I took from him. Coach Connors, I think it was the relationship more than anything. Like, he just was a phenomenal coach to be around every day. And he was kind of our post player coach. So we went big, little. That was always like a highlight for me in high school.
Coach Connors loved big guys.
He did.
Love the big guys.
I mean, truthfully, when you hear him say, "Hey, we need to throw it in the post every possession," I mean, you're a post player, you're going to love the guy.
Exactly.
And then Coach Casey, similar to Coach Thompson, he was just a great man. And he was, in his own way, highly competitive and hated to lose. And I think from an X's and O's standpoint, he was always a coach that kept it really simple on offense, and with guys like you and other guys that came up through Strongsville, I think he was able to do that. But defensively, we always mixed up our defenses, and from an X's and O standpoint, I kind of learned that from him because I still do that to this day as a coach, kind of find myself coaching, kind of like he did, as far as mixing defenses and having different looks to give teams. Coach Banks in BW, I never had been around a coach who was more thorough with everything that he did. He had notebooks and notebooks of journals that he did about every practice. Like he would tell us, he would do a journal after every practice. And then I think the thing that I also learned from him was, and I think it's a special coach that can get players to not want to lose because you saw the pain on his face, and it wasn't a comment or like that he would, go off if we lost, but you could just feel that he was in pain when we would lose a game. And you didn't want to make him feel that way. Like you wanted, you worried, like, is he going to go home and talk to his wife this weekend? Because we lost to John Carroll. So it was like, man, we got to win for Coach. And so it was just a genuine love that you had for Coach Bankson that, I think it stuck with me.
You have a favorite memory from playing at BW?
I definitely, my sophomore year, it was, there were only 32 teams that made the Division III National Tournament. And so we got upset by Muskingum in the semifinals, and we had a good year. It finished second in the league to John Carroll, and, we're like, our season's over. And then we kind of figured out, well, there's like 6 games that could go a certain way. And if the favorite would win, we might get in that large bid. Man, I'm really dating myself, but we were sitting in our dorm, and it was actually my dorm room. You had to call in to get updates of the scores. So we're calling every 15 minutes and we're keeping track of it. And lo and behold, every game goes our way and we get in that large bid. And we were, I can't remember our record, but we were probably like 17-9. And we find out we're basically going to the number 1 team in the country, Hope College, 27-0. Coach Bankson shows us film of them, and they're throwing alley-oops to their 6'10" post player. And, at Division III level, you don't see that very often. They look unbeatable. And Coach is like, well, we're not going to watch any more of that. And then we go up there, and they covered D3 basketball tremendously up there. There's reporters everywhere, and it's, they're camping out to get tickets. And, we go up like 12-0 on them, and they battle back. And I actually had 2 god-awful turnovers. I traveled 2 times in a row as we're trying to hold the ball. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just lost the game for us. And we're down 1, and one of our guards, Ryan Soy, hits a game winner with 1 second left, and we upset him on the home court. So that was definitely the highlight of my years at BW for sure.
Yeah, those moments, I think, when you get involved in any game where there's a buzzer beater, especially in that kind of scenario, that's exciting stuff to be able to look back. And it's funny, again, the things that stick out and that you remember, and just how important it is just to think about, again, your teammates. You mentioned playing with Joe, and obviously that he was the best teammate that you ever played with. And Ryan, I've known for a long time. And just, you think about the guys that you had an opportunity to play with that you're still connected to today. That's really what it's all about. Just that kind of camaraderie that you can build with your teammates is something special. Looking to grow your coaching? United Basketball Plus has over 3,000 plays and 45 deep dive courses with some of the best minds in the game, including Tyler Costin, Paul Kelleher, Tobin Anderson, Dave Love, and more. You can also view their United Basketball clinics and receive 50% off in-person clinics. United Basketball Plus is partnered with Jordan and Joe's Decision for their skill development curriculum. United Basketball Plus is a one-stop shop to help you grow as a coach, leader, and culture builder. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code CLINIC to receive an annual membership for just $50. Talk a little about your first experience coaching when you get done playing.
Sure. So I graduated from BW in 1997, and I'm hoping to go coach at Brunswick. Joe got hired as a 24-year-old. They hired him as the varsity coach, and they had I majored in history and social studies and education. So I'm a social studies teacher. So they have a social studies opening, and I go over there and coach. We're all really young and pretty fiery, and we had those early years. We had some really good years. We had some years where we struggled, but I just remember just coaching with Joe and the other coaches on our staff and just learning, how to become a better coach, how to interact with kids, how to run a program. And I learned so much in those first few years and had such great experiences with those guys, both the players and the coaches.
What's something that you feel like you were pretty good at right out of the gate as a coach?
I think X's and O's wise, I think that basketball just kind of has always come natural to me. Really can see things on the court and kind of know how to take your team and kind of figure out, all right, if we do these things, this is going to lead us to the most success. Like, I feel like my strength as a coach is probably that, just putting kids in a position where they're going to max out their success. So I think I've always kind of had a good feel for that part of the game, and then also just building rapport with kids. I think that's something I really enjoy, and it truly is one of the best parts of coaching.
What's something that you weren't very good at?
Organization. I was a train wreck. So, like things like fundraising and just being like, I told Joe, hey, I want to be a head coach. And he was like, all right, let's, so I was always on the front door with everything he was doing so I could learn, this is how this not just being a head coach, but it's all the little things that go behind the scenes that people don't realize that you truly can't really appreciate till you have to do it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I don't think anybody who's not in the business really understands all the demands that you have as a head coach. I don't care what the level is, but talking about it on the high school level, you think about just dealing with all the budgeting stuff and the travel and the staff and just the academics. And there's just so many things that people don't think about when they go and they sit in the stands and they watch a game on Friday night. It's just, there's a whole process to making sure that everything runs the way it does. And then obviously as a head coach, you're not only responsible for your varsity team, but when you're coaching at a public school, you're kind of responsible for that K-12 entire basketball program. And there's pieces of that we'll get into here in a few minutes. But after you get done, I should say after you finish coaching there with Joe as an assistant, you get an opportunity to be the girls' head coach. So what was the thought process there? Was that something that you were like, hey, this is an opportunity to be a head coach? Or was it something that, hey, I think I'm going to like coaching girls. Hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to like coaching girls, but I want to be a head coach. Just what was the mentality as you took that opportunity?
Sure. I think a lot of it was I applied for some jobs and I didn't get an interview. And I would ask like, hey, why didn't I get an interview? Well, you don't have any head coaching experience. So I felt like if I'm ever going to, be a head coach, I have to be a head coach.
Right.
And I think, and that's one of the things I always tell young coaches, don't look at, and I hate to say this, hopefully I'm not going to alienate anybody, but, when I first got into coaching, I thought, if you're a male coaching girls, it's because you're, not good enough to coach boys.
Right.
And then my daughter's born and right away, she gravitates to the gym and loves basketball. And then I'm thinking to myself, so am I going to say that my daughter is going to, that having a male coach it means that person's not good enough coach for her? And I was like, that's ridiculous, So, coaching girls to me was, I looked at it as a great opportunity. And, obviously I coached girls for a number of years. I really not only enjoyed it, I loved it. And some of the coaches I went against, both men and women, were just outstanding coaches. So for me, to take the girls' job, I felt like it was an honor and I was really excited. And I felt like it was something that could further my career.
What was the biggest adjustment for you, or just in terms of coaching girls at that level versus obviously you coach boys, you played on all men's teams. It's just it's a different animal. So how did you go about and making adjustments, or did you make any adjustments? What was it like making that transition?
Well, I think if you asked some of the girls that played for me early on, they probably thought I was crazy. And I learned that I learned a lot. Like, I think the biggest thing I learned was girls are coachable to a fault, I always say, because if you tell them, like, this is the defense we're going to run, this is a set we're going to run, they are going to run it exactly to perfection. And they're typically never going to break off and just go make a play. Whereas a boy is the opposite. They're like, well, coach, I know you called that set, but I can beat my guy, so I'm going to go do it. And so with girls, like, technically, I think you really have to make sure that whatever you're running is technically on point with your talent, because they're going to carry it out to a T, which I really liked and enjoyed and appreciated out of, my players.
Yeah, I think that's something that for sure, in my experience coaching both my daughters, coaching my son, and being a high school boys coach for a long time, I think part of what you learn is that, yeah, the girls are more, I don't know if open is the right way to say it, but they certainly will stick to the game plan, I think, better than the boys will. And then I think on the personality side, I think one of the things that I found is when you can bring your girls' team together, that bond becomes super strong. Now, you can clearly have personality issues, and not every girls' team out there comes together in the same way. But I think if you can get them to come together and play for each other, I think that sometimes that can be even stronger than what you get with the boys, where there is more of sort of, I think that, again, this is just a generality, but there's more of that individual side of it on the boys' side. Even when you build a team that is completely together, I think that the ceiling for that togetherness is higher for the girls, if that makes any sense.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I think that girls value that whole, we're a team, we're a unit, more than probably boys do, and I think that's what makes coaching girls so much fun, is that, your program is really, and not that it isn't with boys, but it is truly like a big family. They're all sisters and they all care about each other. And, they care more about the team dynamic than they do individual success. I've always found that to be true.
So this past year, you get an opportunity. You were coaching the girls there at Berea. You get an opportunity to come and take over the boys program. First of all, I guess start with the why you decided this was the right time to be able to do that. Obviously, Duke steps down after being there for a long time, so the opportunity presents itself. But just talk again about just sort of the why behind it, and then we'll dive into what you're going to do to continue to build that program.
Sure. I've been teaching at Berea. I taught at Berea High School, Midpark High School. I taught at the junior high. I've taught at now, of course, Berea-Midpark High School. So it is, my family lives in the community. So this community means a lot to me and to my family. Really, our three communities, Berea, Brook Park, and Middleburg Heights. And then I have three kids. I have 2 daughters and a son. My oldest, Kendall's 18, a senior. And then I have twins that are 8th graders, and they all love basketball. So, it was, I've always coached my girls more than my son. So, when Coach Barther decided to step down and to spend time with his kids, it was a really difficult family decision that we sat down. I first asked my wife and my kids, and it was difficult. My younger daughter Regan, I think she'll never forgive me, but I think that it was a great opportunity, and girls but boys program is with our new high school, and we have a new athletic director. Our facilities, it's just It's a great job. It's a phenomenal job, and I feel fortunate to be the head coach.
So when you get the job and you start thinking about, which obviously you probably were thinking about it before you officially got named the head coach, but as you were thinking about what you wanted to do with the program in terms of your vision and where you saw it going, what were some of the things that you knew you wanted to prioritize in this first year as you start thinking about building the program into what you want, what you hope it can become?
The first time I was a head coach, I thought, well, my job is to be the varsity head coach. I run the varsity program. And that was really the extent of it. And that's just not how it is. You're really the coach starting, I guess you'd maybe start in third grade, that third grade travel basketball. You have to be a part of that. In fact, I'm coaching a third grade, I'm coaching a group of little third grade boys in the B League and in our travel league. You're part of the middle school program and you have to run the high school program. So you are the face of the program, third grade through 12th grade. And I think that, is that how it should be? I don't really know, but that's how it is. And you really have to buy into that fact that you have to get to know your kids, starting in third grade. And so we've tried with my staff. We have a lot of great community people on the staff that understand that and buy into it. And I think that's probably what I'm most excited about is the staff that we've put together that understand that we are a community-based program.
So give me an idea of what that looks like. So obviously, okay, you're coaching a third grade team. How much do you get involved in working with the coaches in the travel program? How do you approach your middle school in terms of being involved with those coaches and making sure that they understand what you're trying to accomplish with the high school program? Just tell me a little bit about how you put your hands into each one of those pieces beyond, obviously your hand is really involved in the third grade team that you're coaching, but just going beyond that, when you start talking about being able to have an influence across all those different levels of the program, how do you envision it working for you and your staff? What does that look like?
Sure. So basically, we started with a coaches clinic with all our rec travel coaches, Coach McNamara, girls coach, and myself. Put it on. It was about an hour long, hour and a half, where we went through just basic identity. This is the identity of our program. I'm not going to get into micromanaging a fourth grade travel team and say, you better run these sets. And we don't get involved like that, but we want the kids to all be part of our identity, that we're all going to play fast. We are going to let kids make plays. We're not going to get bogged down with a million sets or, being too coach controlled. We want our players to be able to make plays. And my middle school coaches, two of them coach travel basketball as well. So now we have that connection between, all right, we have three travel coaches that are middle school and high school coaches. So we have that connection. So the parents see, all right, our head coach and our ninth grade coach and our seventh grade coach are also coaching travel teams. So they can kind of see that we are investing in their kids. And it's really just a top-down approach of let's play fast, let's make it fun. And we want kids smiling and really just enjoying their experience.
When you started looking at the high school program and you thought about getting connected to the players that are coming back, but also the families that are returning with those players, how'd you go about engaging the parents and families of the boys in the program just to kind of get off on the right foot with them as you take over the job?
Can't think of the name of the book, but it was a book about a guy who took over a ship in the Navy, and it was the worst ship in the whole Navy. And within 2 years, it was the number one ship in the Navy. And his biggest point was he brought every single person in and said, tell me one thing you liked about the old captain, one thing you didn't like, and one suggestion that you had. So, I read that book about 4 years ago, and I've taken that. So I just sent out a little Google form to every parent asking that same question, those 3 questions. And it's really interesting because I've done it for a couple of years now. You get such consistency in answers of what parents and I send it to the kid too, what parents like, what they don't like, and the suggestions that they have, and the kids are very, very similar. And what you find is, because you hear, well, parents are so difficult. Very few people had a whole lot of negative things to say about the program. I mean, most people were extremely positive. I think the thing that parents want is a coaching staff that invests in their kids and is involved with them before they get into high school. I mean, that is the common theme that I've seen. So it was, for me, really like easy transition to be involved with our program at the lower levels. Plus, I'm pretty lucky because which can be a good or bad thing, but I'm friends with, my wife and I are friends with a lot of parents whose kids are part of our program, which, like I said, can be a good thing. It, could ultimately be a bad thing, but I think it was easy because those lines of communication were open and I could talk to them pretty easily.
Yeah, to be able to have that, I think reaching out to people proactively to get their thoughts, to get their input, and to be able to also get a read on the landscape of where the program's been and where people want it to go or what they envision for it. I think those are all valuable things that you can take in as a coach and then sort of let that shape and figure out what it is that you want to do and how you want to go about meeting those needs that you're hearing from both the parents and the players. I think the more you can communicate with them proactively, obviously the better off you are when you build those relationships in a positive way. Then if you ever do get into a situation where you have an interaction that's maybe a little bit more difficult, you've already got this positive vibe going with the parent because you've communicated with them, right? Just like being a teacher, you want to be able to have that first interaction be a positive one, not the first time that you're calling and saying, hey, your kid's in trouble in class, and now all of a sudden there's no relationship for you to fall back on. So I think that proactive communication is really important. When you started looking at your guys and trying to figure out, okay, what is it that we want to do? How much of you from a basketball, I guess, philosophy standpoint, when you start thinking about, what you've done in your other stints as a head coach, what you've learned as an assistant coach, how much of sort of the identity, you mentioned you want to play fast, you want to give players some freedom to be able to play. When you start looking at your personnel and start thinking about adjustments or things that you want to do based on that, how do you go into a season sort of preparing and thinking about what you want to do with your team on both ends of the floor? What does that look like? What is that process for you?
If I bring our team into it and I start thinking about it, before I even think about the players, I try to say, okay, if I know nothing about my players, what do I want to do offensively and defensively? I always start with that, which for me is, a modified dribble drive, tack, transition basketball. Defensively, it is pressing, pressure, multiple defenses. And then, then you look at your personnel and say, okay, can we do these things? Well, for us, this spring, our point guard, who's a phenomenal player, Jason Levis, transfers to Lutheran West. And then 7 of our top 8 guys play football. So I don't see them all July, August, September, watch them on the football field. And, I've never had to deal with that. So it's really been interesting, to say, even the first week of practice, they were in the playoffs. So we didn't have them the first week of practice. So it wasn't until the second week of practice that I got to see them and say, okay, well, we can maybe do this and this over here, but this other thing, now we can't really do it. So to me, we have like a really throwback team of kids who play multiple sports. Like all our guys, honestly, our varsity guys play at least 2 sports, at least half of them play 3 sports. So it's really like a throwback to a different generation where kids played, 2 and 3 sports. So I've kind of really enjoyed that part of it because I've always coached kids who, not always, but most of the time, who have specialized and have played basketball all year round. So to coach a group like this, I've really enjoyed it.
So how did you approach then that off season, the summer and the fall, where you're going into it knowing that, hey, the guys who are probably most likely to be on the floor for me are guys that aren't going to be around as much as, obviously, as a basketball coach, you'd like to have those guys around to be a part of it. And yet, obviously, you understand that they're playing other sports. And as you said, it harkens back to a different era. But just how did you approach that, where obviously you've got kids coming and participating in the things that you're doing, but yet you know that, hey, my top 7 or 8 guys aren't here with us. Just how did you go about approaching that as a coach? And then how did you approach that with the kids who were there participating in the things that you were doing in the off season?
Sure, that was tough. That was really tough, I'll be honest, because we bring our 7th and 8th graders into our open gym because we have multiple gyms here at the high school. So we were having like between 50 and 70 kids at open gym, and I kept, telling the kids, like, this is a great opportunity for you to put some time in to your skills, to the weight room, to playing, with the idea that you should be better than guys who play a fall sport. But ultimately, and this is the hardest thing, I think, in these types of situations, and I think you just got to be straight up and honest with kids. When the football guys show up, if they're better than you, they're better. Yes, off-season commitment is important. It's a huge part of our program. But when our first game hits, the best kids are going to play. And I think as a coach, it's really hard. Like, it's difficult when you see a couple kids who have dedicated their fall to basketball, and then some kids who are just, flat out better athletes walk in the gym and take their spot. So I think that, if I could give advice to any young coach going through that, just be really honest. Don't promise anything. Don't tell kids, well, because you were here all summer, you get that spot. And then you ultimately realize the other kid's better. And, you have to come back and tell that kid something completely opposite. I think kids might not like it, but they can accept it if you're honest.
Yeah, I think ultimately they probably like it more, maybe not in the exact moment when they're being told that, but I think ultimately kids want to know where they stand and what their role is and where they fit. And if you do that, I think ultimately that even though the kid might not like what you have to say, I think they're going to respect it and they'll be able to better deal with the situation that they have in front of them, instead of kind of going in with, as you said, like a little uncertainty of, well, here, this, that. And if you kind of hem and haw and don't give them the right answer, it makes it tough and it makes it a challenge. And I can't imagine, like, for you, again, as a head coach, kind of going through that process. And, typically, you might have 1 or 2 kids that are playing a fall sport that are key components of your team, but to have 7 out of your 8 that are guys that are in your rotation, clearly, that's a challenge. And, as you said, missing Jason as well, who played with my son AAU. He's just he's phenomenal. He's so much fun to watch, and obviously would have been a big part of your team had he stayed at Berea. But nonetheless, when you start thinking about again getting into building your team, putting it together day to day on the practice floor, what's your process for putting together a practice plan day by day? How do you go about doing that? Is that something you sit down by yourself? Is that something that you work through with your staff? Do you do it at the computer? You write it down, handwritten? Just what's the process?
Yeah, I think we try to leverage as much technology as we can. So, everything in our program is on Google Doc, it is on the Google Drive. And all my coaches have access to it. Practice plans are on there. So throughout the school day, they're able to edit things and say, hey, what about this coach? We try to plan it out by month. So, the first month of the season, what do we want to accomplish, in terms of X amount of time with skills, with team concepts, with offense and defense, special situations. We just want to make sure that, when our first game hits, that we are prepared and ready and we have everything in. So our staff spends a great deal of time organizing and getting that all laid out. And then week by week, then it becomes, what do we want to do every single day? So for us, we do a transition drill to start practice every day. And then we do a ton of shooting. We shoot a ton of threes. On my early years, we would drill a lot, but now we do a lot more small-sided games, concepts, 5-on-5. We don't do a ton of 5-on-0 anymore. Everything is, truly like 3-on-3, 4-on-4, or 5-on-5. And we don't stop practice very much. We coach them on the side, and we really try to make everything as game-like as possible. I think, I hope if you ask our players, they really enjoy practice because there's not a lot of drills that will not apply to a game, and I think that's one thing we pride ourselves on.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more. You mentioned about coaching guys when they're on the side, and I think that's one of the things that, especially young coaches, and I know I can think back to early in my career, trying to figure out how do you balance correcting players versus not stopping the action every 2 seconds to be able to correct things. I've told this story before on the podcast, Kevin, when my very first coaching experience was as the JV coach at Bay, and I was by myself for my first practice, and I had 12 or 15 kids, and came in and we ran a drill the first 5 minutes of practice. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like I just witnessed like 500 mistakes that I want to correct. How am I possibly ever going to be able to fix all this stuff? And obviously, as you go on in your career, you learn that you have to kind of pick and choose and pick your spots. But how do you go about with your staff thinking about that piece of bringing them to the sideline versus not stopping the practice to kind of keep it flowing? What does that specifically look like for you? Do you have certain coaches that are looking for certain things where somebody's watching the offense, somebody's watching the defense? Are you overseeing the whole thing? Do you focus in on one particular aspect? Just how do you go about organizing to make sure that guys are getting coached?
Yeah, we don't designate things specifically by coach, but we do we do kind of just take turns. I have one assistant who technically X's and O's wise, he's phenomenal. So he kind of focuses on mistakes on our out of bounds plays or our presses or our offense. And he'll pull guys aside and really focus on that. And then my other assistant is, a special ed teacher. He just excels with dealing with difficult kids, kids that, have bad moments. So he kind of focuses on, attitudinal stuff. And, when a kid needs a pick me up, he's great at that. And then I really try not to talk too much at practice. Besides hey, we're doing this drill, boom, 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 10 minutes on the clock. Here we go. And I really try to let my coaches coach our kids up in practice, because I know as an assistant coach, if I get bored at practice, and I really lose my focus, and I'm really just not helping the cause very much. So I always want my assistants to feel like, they have a huge role to play. So I kind of let them, do a lot of the correcting and fixing in practice.
I think that's really important as a head coach to be able to engage your assistant coaches and be able to utilize what they bring to the table. And then also just, again, to develop them depending upon where they are in their career. Some of them may want to be head coaches if you have some young assistant coaches. And then obviously if you have some coaches who maybe have been a head coach that come back and they want to be an assistant at this point in their career. But it's always interesting, I think, to hear head coaches talk about how they utilize their assistants to make sure that they stay engaged. I think that's one of your most important responsibilities as a head coach, because as you said, it's very easy as a head coach to sort of become dominant and be the dominant voice that everybody hears. And I think that does two things. One, as you said, it kind of undercuts the assistants and they don't get the opportunity to be heard. And then I also think that players get tired of hearing the same voice over and over and over again if the only person they ever hear from is the head coach. So I think to be able to have the assistants be able to step in and do some of those things, to me, it makes a lot more sense to have a more balanced response to what goes on in practice, because now you're hearing a bunch of different voices and the kids don't get tired of hearing, oh man, here comes the head coach, one more time, where he's the only person that ever talks. I think when you get that balance, it makes a lot more sense, makes for a lot more productive practice. What have you done on the outside of the program to promote it? I know one of the things that I've seen you do, and just going through and seeing social media, I know you guys did a summer shooting program that you put stuff out on social media about that. You got your Indiana Indiana style warm-ups that you put out there for people to see. So just talk a little bit about what you've done to kind of promote the program social media wise, maybe within the school and with the staff and students, to try to get people excited about the program. Because I think that's something that's maybe underrated as a coach.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And it's, again, I feel like when it comes to social media, you can go two ways about it. With kids today, I think they appreciate when their head coach is, active on social media, and we kind of celebrate our successes. So we try to leverage our Twitter and Facebook. And, the big thing I told the kids was, we're going to take care of you guys. So we got them travel suits, the same ones that St. B's has for their guys. We got the blue and orange striped pants. We did our shooting club. We had a big fundraiser with our girls program, kind of a wing night with baskets. So we're trying to really make the program as big as possible in our communities, and most importantly in our kids' eyes. Like, I want them to feel special when they get off the bus. Like, we played North Royalton our first game, and got a couple people I know from North Royalton, and we're like, man, your guys look good. The travel suits were nice, and your warm-ups were awesome. And it's a little thing, but all those little things add up to a kid feeling like our program's special. So we try to leverage social media as well to recognize our players academically in their other sports, socially when they're doing great things in the community. So that's something that we feel like is going to be a huge part of our program.
Yeah, it's really an important part. I think that sometimes as adults, we sometimes discount how important those little things are and how much they mean to kids. Like, I know that, think back to when you were a player, how important it was that you got the number that you wanted, right? Like, that was critical. And then sometimes you're sitting in the coach's office as a coach, and you're figuring out uniforms, and you're looking at sizes, and you're like, just whatever, just take 31 or whatever, whatever the number is.
Sure.
And you're like, what does it matter? And then you remember as a kid, you were like, God, that was like the most important thing ever, was what number was I going to get? Was I going to get the number that I wanted? And I think sometimes we as adults take those little things for granted. I think if you do that as a coach, if you look at those little things, and especially again with social media, as you said, and just taking care of those little things that are important to kids, just sets you apart, as you said, to make your program feel special, to make the kids feel like, hey, being a part of this is something that not everybody gets to do. And there's a reason why I want to be a part of it, because all these little things that, as I said, adults sometimes take for granted, kids don't. And those are the things that, as you said, right from the very beginning, talking about, it's about the experience, right? And so if you as the coach can provide them with the kind of experience that is one that they're going to look back on 30 years from now and be like, man, I was so lucky to be a part of Berea basketball and to play for Coach Braaten. Like, to me, that's what you want. You want the kids to be looking back and saying, yeah, you're going to win some games, you're going to lose some games, but ultimately you want that experience to be a positive one. I think that's really critical. Before we wrap up, Kevin, I want to ask you one more final two-part question. So first part is, when you look ahead through the remainder of this season and on into the off season, what's the biggest challenge that you see in front of you? And then the second part is, when you think about what you get to do every day as the head coach at Berea, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Well, the biggest challenge is, we if I look at our season, our league is very competitive. I don't think that there's a team that is, at the level of, obviously a St. V's or where Ignatius is right now, but there's not a game that we go into where we're like, if we have a bad night, we're still going to win. So every game is going to be a tough game for us. And then, our non-conference schedule, we picked up Brecksville, we picked up Strongsville. We're challenging our guys to raise the level of their games because we want to compete with the best. So, that is something that I think is a huge challenge for us. And then the other thing, as we look more in the future, challenge-wise, is, right now, the starting backcourt at Lutheran West are Berea kids, and St. V's has 2 Berea kids starting. So as a staff, we have to figure out, how do we keep these kids home?
Right.
And so we've started some things where we actually had a recruiting day with our own kids, and brought in their parents and them, some of our best 8th graders, because, that's my son's class. It's a very talented class. If they all come here, we could really have a special, 4 years of basketball. So we actually brought them in and, recruited them to stay home. So, something that you didn't think that you'd ever have to do, but that's, again, the landscape that we're in. What brings me the biggest joy is just having the opportunity to lead this program. There's great people. We have great parents. We have great, our players, phenomenal kids. We have a team GPA well over a 3-point. They're doing great things on the, socially away from basketball. They're multi-sport kids. We're doing something in our community. And, I was, just floored. We're adopting a family that's had just a huge loss, multiple family members with cancer, and a little boy who's just, had all kinds of health problems. And I threw it out to the parents, said, we're going to adopt this family. My wife made a spreadsheet of like all these wants that these kids, the family had, because they can't afford a Christmas. And literally within 10 minutes, the sheet was filled up.
That's awesome.
And parents want to donate money. When you see things like that, you're part of something special. So, that type of thing, like, really honestly chokes me up and makes me feel just really fortunate to be a part of this program.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Kevin. I think when you can have an impact, not only on the floor, but off the floor, that's really what it's all about. And when you get the chance to involve not only the players, but then involve their families, makes it all the more meaningful. Again, going back to what we talked about off the top, it's all part of the experience. And if you can give those kids an experience that goes beyond basketball and have an impact on their lives, man, you've really done something. Before we get out, I want to give you a chance to share how people can find out more about your program, how they can connect with you. So whether you want to share your social media accounts, email, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Sure. Anybody can email me at any time. I'm pretty open and in responding. And that's K Braaten, Braaten at Berea-Schools with an S.org. And then you can check out our Twitter page, which is at BMHS Titan B Hoops. Our athletic department does a phenomenal job with a lot of graphics. And, if you live in our communities, you can follow our program on Twitter and really kind of get a feel for what it's like.
Kevin, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to jump on with us probably long overdue. Again, just want to say thanks to you for being willing to jump on, and to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.